I'm so excited to have Dr. Marc Brackett on the program today. So, you may or may not know that I'm working on my PhD, and my specialty or my area of research is the intersection of emotional intelligence and mindfulness. And in my research, I have uh, looked at literally thousands of articles on emotional intelligence, and there's a name that pops up very commonly and very prominently in all of my research. And that name is Dr. Marc Brackett. He is the president and founder of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And I got to meet him last year at a mindfulness conference, and he was so kind, so brilliant, and I could not wait to have him on as a guest. So I'm very excited today for you to meet Dr. Marc Brackett, the mindful leader. Dr. Marc Brackett is the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and professor in the Child Study Center at the Yale School of Medicine at Yale University. As a researcher for over 20 years, Marc has founded on the role of emotions and emotional intelligence in learning, decision-making, creativity, relationships, health, and performance. Dr. Brackett is the author of the best-selling book, Permission to Feel, that we're going to talk about today. He is the author, I just said that. This book has been translated into 22 languages, which is very impressive. Most recently, with the Pinterest co-founder, Ben Silbermann, he and his team co-created the Apple award-winning app, How We Feel. And I use that app, and it's very impressive, and I talk about it in my talks on emotional intelligence and promote that app. So we'll talk about that in a bit. The app was designed to teach emotion skills and enhance well-being. He has published over 150 scholarly articles, and we'll talk about that in a minute also, and has received numerous awards, including the Joseph E. Zenz Award for his research on social and emotional learning and an honorary doctorate from Manhattanville College. He is on the board of directors of the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, the Mental Health Coalition Program Board, founded by Kenneth Cole, and the Rare Beauty Mental Health Council, founded by none other than Selena Gomez. He is the lead developer of Ruler, which we'll talk about, a systemic evidence-based approach to social and emotional learning that has been adopted by over 4,500 schools across the United States and in many other countries and has affected millions of children. This is such great work he's doing. He regularly consults with many large companies, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and on and on and on and on best practices for integrating the principles of emotional intelligence into their training and product design. He's also the co-founder of OG Life Lab. Am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm.
A corporate learning firm that develops innovative digital learning systems for emotional intelligence. And here's one of my favorite parts, Dr. Brackett. He holds a 5th degree black belt in Hapkido. Am I saying that right?
You got it.
Korean martial arts. So he is an absolute badass. Don't mess with him. He'll take you down.
There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited. I've been really looking forward to this, Dr. Marc Brackett. And I've been waiting to ask you this question. Dr. Brackett, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I bet you were waiting to ask that. Well, as I mentioned before we got on the show, I'm just getting over my second round of COVID. So I don't know, I'm still a little foggy in the brain, so I'm not sure what's going to come out today, but maybe it'll be better than usual because it'll be more spontaneous. Specifically, excited to be here. And I'm actually in a good place because I have family coming to visit me this weekend. I'm very excited to see family I haven't seen in a long time.
Oh, good. Fun.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry about the COVID, but I'm super excited that you were here. You and I met last fall at the Mindful Leader Conference.
Yeah, I'll be there again this year.
I know. I'm excited about that. I was so excited last year that you were there because I'm working on my PhD and my research is on the intersection of mindfulness and emotional intelligence. And
Well,
when I saw that you were going to be there, I was like, oh my goodness, I might get to meet Dr. Brackett because you've published over 150 scholarly articles on this topic, and I have cited you in many, many, many of my papers. And I was like, I get to meet Dr. Brackett. I get to find out what he looks like and all this stuff. And your keynotes were fantastic. And then I hung around for your workshop. And not only are you obviously absolutely brilliant, but you were just super cool and just a very friendly, nice guy. Not pretentious at all. You were just super nice. And that was refreshing that you were just a cool guy. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm gonna, be a regular on your podcast because now my self-esteem has been jumped up by like 20 points. So thank you.
All right. So for people who may not know, or maybe they have all kinds of conceptions and misconceptions about emotional intelligence, let's hear it from the expert's mouth. Dr. Brackett, what is emotional intelligence?
So the way we like to think about it, and you have to give credit where credit is due. I'm very lucky that I was trained by the two scientists who coined the term emotional intelligence. That's Peter Salovey, who is the president of Yale now, and Jack Mayer, who is at the University of New Hampshire. He's a professor. And, I think what was clever, about what they did was they took this whole field of emotions and they tried to organize it. And what I mean by that is that there were researchers, studying how kids develop their understanding of feelings. There were researchers studying how do people deal with their feelings. There were researchers studying vocabulary of emotions. There were researchers studying how people read emotions in faces. And there were researchers who were studying how, like, your moods influence the way you judge things and see the world. And so they pulled all those literatures together and said, well, what would it be like if there were a group of people who were just smarter on average than other people about how they dealt with feelings, how they perceived emotions, how they understood emotions, and how they regulated emotions. And essentially that became the theory of emotional intelligence. And, at its simplest form, it's our ability to reason with and about emotions. Now, they came up with a model called the ability model of emotional intelligence that I have worked with now for almost 30 years. And, to make that model accessible, and I spent a lot of time since its inception kind of refining and defining the different components of it. And that's where the acronym RULER comes in, which is recognizing emotions in ourselves and others, understanding the causes and the consequences of our feelings, labeling feelings with precise words, knowing how and when to express emotions with different people across context and culture, and then the big one, which is the regulation piece. What do we do to regulate our emotions to achieve the goals that we have in life, including well-being and good relationships?
That's fantastic. We're going to go through each of those step by step as we talk to. I had this question. I was going to save it to the end, but I'm curious now as we're describing EI. What are some maybe myths or misconceptions that you hear people when they talk about emotional intelligence that maybe kind of drive you crazy? What are some things you hear about EI that just really get under your skin?
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
I bet.
And only because I come at it from a scientific perspective,
Right.
Not a journalistic perspective, or a pop psychology perspective. Now,
Right.
I believe in translating psychological scientific concepts for the real world. I think that's critically important.
Sure.
But in doing so, I think it's important to stay true to the science and just the general conceptions. And so I think the first big one is kind of what is this construct, right? Is it a belief? Is it a skill? Is it a personality trait? Mm-hmm. And what you find is that, ever since the inception of emotional intelligence, people have gone in many different directions.
Right.
I don't think emotional intelligence is your belief system. It just doesn't make any sense to me. How can it be an intelligence? Because intelligence is, by definition, no matter what kind of intelligence it is, math intelligence, spatial intelligence, it's about how your brain is problem solving. And so beliefs are important. I'm not saying they're not important. I just think we have to call them what they are, which is your beliefs, your attitudes, your mindsets.
Right.
Personality traits are important, right? We know that people who are extroverted and introverted and conscientious or disorganized or neurotic like me or stable like others, those traits are predictive, of the way you see the world, outcomes. But at the same time, I think what's important to acknowledge is that they're traits. They are, they influence the way we see the world. They influence what we like to do, the people that we like to hang around, the kind of work that we might want to do. But again, they're traits. They're not skills. And then I think there is the skill-based model, which is the model that I am a proponent of, which is that you have to build knowledge around emotion, like anger is about injustice. You have to know that there are different forms of anger, like peeved, irritated, anger, enraged.
Mm-hmm.
You have to try to understand why people feel that way in general, like kind of the appraisal process around that, and then the specifics for different people. And then, understand that there are regulation strategies to deal with that feeling. To me, that's emotional intelligence.
Yeah, very good. So the book is Permission to Feel: The Power of Emotional Intelligence to Achieve Well-Being and Success. So tell us why you decided to write this book.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, I had been a professor for 20 years. I had done, 150 or so publications, around measurement, around people's beliefs about it, around what it predicts about people's lives. I also have an approach to social and emotional learning that teaches emotional intelligence that I co-created with many other people that is now, reached over 4 million children. So I've run around the world and I've gone to different countries and I've taught to people of all kind of backgrounds about this work. And I realized that it was time to share what I had learned and also really get into the barriers. So for me, I'm frustrated as a psychologist. I'm frustrated as a interventionist or prevention scientist, in that, we've had a concept like emotional intelligence in the world for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody talks about it. People like you know about it. People who like what you do, you've coached people, I'm guessing, and you do trainings.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
that's really important. And that's great. So it means it's out in the world, like it's a concept that people know about and people actually choose jobs to teach it, which is fascinating and exciting. And at the same time, the world doesn't seem like it's getting any healthier. And so
Right.
there's this weird thing in my brain. It's like, wait a minute, everybody's talking about emotions and there's no more stigma. And schools are teaching it, companies are adopting it, we have apps, but yet for some reason or another, there's a missing piece. And so as I was really struggling to not write a book that was a book that everybody else could have written, I realized that I think the missing piece is in that title, which is Permission to Feel. That honestly, we have not given ourselves or the people we love or the people we work with the permission to be their true selves. And in not doing so, we're kind of trapped with our emotions, most of us, right? We can't really talk about them in ways that, where we feel safe and we have trust and we're comfortable. And if we can't talk about them, then, we don't build the vocabulary to be more precise. And if we don't get the vocabulary, then we don't really know what to do with those feelings. And so I wrote the book, honestly, because I want to push people to go deeper into, at the core, before we start cultivating these cool skills. We need to create a society where people can be their true, full feeling selves.
That's really well said. I love that. So in the book and in your talks and workshops, you talk about Uncle Marvin. Tell everyone who Uncle Marvin is.
Yeah, he's my hero. So, as you know from reading my book, now I'm like this professor guy with a 5th degree black belt and, objectively pretty successful in life. But I struggled as a kid. And I think, everybody has struggles, some more extreme than others. Just my childhood, unfortunately, involved abuse by a neighbor, and it involved a lot of bullying. And it involved just really struggling with my self-esteem. And so I had 2 parents who loved me a lot, but they just didn't really know anything about emotions. I always joke, like, the one thing I'm certain of is my parents did not get their doctorate in emotional intelligence. I don't even think they got an associate's degree, nor high school graduation, honestly. They didn't, they grew up in an era where, people didn't talk about emotions. People didn't think that it was like children would be seen and not heard, right?
They didn't have permission to feel.
Definitely not.
Right.
And because of that, my father just became very angry and dysregulated. My mother became very anxious and dysregulated. And I share that because, and this is my long way of getting into Uncle Marvin, which is that when you're being bullied and abused, but you have parents who are there for you, but don't really know how to deal with their own feelings, you kind of become reluctant in sharing your feelings with them, right? It's like, eesh, mommy's going to have a nervous breakdown. Daddy's going to yell at me. I'm just going to hide, not suppress, eat, deny. And then one day, this magical person showed up in my life who was my Uncle Marvin, who, by the way, just incredibly for me, while when he was visiting me, he was getting his master's degree in psychological counseling, and at the same time writing a curriculum to teach students about feelings. You couldn't get any, like, it's like a movie, right? It's like, boy suffering uncle serendipitously shows up at house with curriculum to teach feelings.
Yeah.
And we had these beautiful conversations around feelings, and it was the opening for me to share about my childhood experience, and changed my life. It gave me a career. And so I argue, and this is something, a newer line of research I'm actually working on, David, which is everyone needs a feelings mentor.
I love that.
And
that's powerful.
Yeah. Everyone needs a feelings mentor. And the reason why that's the case is that, like, I've had a lot of mentors in my life, academic mentors, but, for them, I'm mostly proving myself. When it came for my, because I wanted this job at Yale, I wasn't going to be that vulnerable with my boss,
Right.
I don't know, I think I'm not smart enough, and I'm a little nervous, and I don't know, maybe my research isn't that great, and that's not going to get you hired, right? But those are the feelings that you have oftentimes, and you need someone to talk to them about them. And so do we have that person in our life who is kind of the listener, who's non-judgmental, who's just there for us? And what I find in the research that I'm doing right now is that many people don't. Only on average, about a half of our society says they have a feelings mentor or their Uncle Marvin.
Yeah.
And I want to make a change. I think that we need to figure out how to help kids grow up with adults in their lives who are those role models.
What a powerful concept. I'm so excited you're doing that. And that even that term, feelings mentor, that's good, because it's the same like in the corporate world. I mean, sharing your feelings can get you destroyed. So that's a great concept. I'm really excited about that. So tell us, in the book, you talk about being an emotion scientist. Tell us what that means.
So if we give ourselves and other people permission to feel, that means we're creating the context, right? That there are no good or bad emotions. We can deal with our feelings. Then we have to figure out, all right, so how do I behave in the world, right? And so the emotion scientist versus the emotion judge is curious, reflective. They want to get granular and specific. When they mess up with their feelings, they don't say things like, I'm a loser, I'll never get better at this. They're like, Mark, failure's okay. Get back on the horse. And the emotion judge is the opposite. The emotion judge, from my perspective, is closed, critical, like they're kind of like the people who are like, suck it up, get over it, move on. Like, what are you worrying about? Stop worrying about that. They're dismissive of feeling. They see emotion as being useless. And they also have more fixed mindsets around how they deal with their feelings. So it's like my father would say things like, son, this is how I deal with my anger. You're going to have to get used to it.
Right.
Okay, Dad. Thanks. That means, I guess, you never have to do anything different. You don't have to learn anything. You don't have to grow, right? You're putting now the onus is on me to figure out how to deal with your dysregulation. Go figure that. That's an easy way out.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people in the world who have that mentality. Everybody has to deal with me and how I am. So it's just on you to figure it out.
Yeah. Don't like those types.
Right.
And so that's the scientist judge kind of phenomenon. And I think what's interesting to me about that is I've gone deeper with that also since writing the book. Because, once you write the book, then you start talking about it, and then you get more ideas as you talk about it, and people give you feedback and stuff. Is that the sometimes we're not just a scientist or a judge globally. It's like we're oftentimes a scientist with some people and a judge with other people. I find myself, like, my patience is much thinner for the people that I love the most. Like, my family, I'm like, get over it, move on. And then I have like some stranger who's struggling, and I'm like, you want to go for coffee? Let's talk about it.
Right.
It doesn't go very well. It's like, wait a minute. So you have the choice to be the scientist and you're just choosing not to be the scientist, with me. It's like, I guess so.
Right.
So context matters. I think just physical health matters. So if you don't take care of yourself, get enough sleep, you're much faster to be the judge, when you're tired or hungry.
Yeah. That's all true. Very good. So let's, you talk in this section on emotion scientist about grit and resilience. Talk about how that fits in.
Well, those are all important concepts. And I differentiate grit from emotional intelligence in that grit, I see, and I think Angela Duckworth would agree with me, is more of a personality trait. So gritty people are people who just have that kind of way of like thinking, it's about passion and purpose and productivity. But, as someone who works at an institution where people have a lot of grit, not everybody behaves emotionally intelligently with their grit. By way of example, the student who would email me 25 times saying, I need an A. You have to give me an A. I can't get an A minus. How could you give me an A minus? That's gritty. It's also very annoying.
Right.
And so I think grit without self-awareness, grit without self-regulation, can be problematic.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So a good chunk of the book is going through what you talked about earlier is ruler. So let's go through each one of these. So the R in ruler, you said, is recognizing emotion. So
Yeah.
let's go a little deeper into that.
Yeah. So importantly, every one of the ruler skills is both intra and interpersonal. And what I mean by that is that it's about self-awareness. So how is Mark feeling? And then it's about social awareness. How are you feeling, David? And, we try to infer how we feel ourselves and how other people feel by paying attention to different cues and clues. So in myself, I'm paying attention to like, where's my brain at? Like, am I saying things like, what's going on with you right now? I don't want to be here. I want to be here. I feel like approaching this information. I feel like avoiding this information. Am I energized? Am I depleted? What's the story I'm telling myself right now? And then for other people, right? We look at, I'm looking at your facial expression right now. Like you got that curious thing going on with your finger there. It could also be judgmental though, like, what's this Mark talking about? And so it's hard to know sometimes, and I think one of the things that actually very excitedly, we just published this week, our new really fancy test of emotion perception skills. It's 31 3-second video clips of people expressing different emotions, and you have to figure out how all those people are feeling. And we make mistakes. We make a lot of mistakes. We make mistakes because some people's baseline facial expression is kind of flat. And so people think that person is sadder or more irritable than another person. Some people are like always smiling, and it's like we overestimate how happy they are.
Right.
And especially when we're around people that we don't know that well, whether in regard to race or gender, right? So we sometimes can have stereotypes in our brains that kind of activate preconceived notions or perceptions of what people should feel, or what we think people who look like that feel. And we have to be careful because it causes violence, right? It causes gossiping. I have a baseline facial expression that's not one that's pleasant, unfortunately for me. And it's not because I'm not pleasant, although, I have some issues. But I'm always like in contemplating stage, but I'm not contemplating like why the sun is out today or the clouds look so beautiful. I'm usually thinking about like that study could be better,
Right.
And so my face oftentimes I look like intense.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people will say things like, is everything okay? What's wrong?
Yeah.
And I'm not. I'm just in a mode of like critical thinking.
So you have resting thinking face.
I love that. Yes. Resting. Yeah. Yes. Resting critical thinking face.
Yeah.
Resting critical thinking. RCTF.
Yeah.
But honestly, that causes problems because people think I'm not approachable.
Right.
Or that something is wrong, or that like, because I was doing that when I walked in the room where they're at, that means I'm projecting that onto them.
Right.
And so it's tricky. So sometimes we have to be, as managers, as leaders, as partners, transparent, be like, I may look like I'm off because I'm thinking about this. And oftentimes also the people that we're interacting with have to say, hey, Mark, how you doing today? Just check in, as opposed to the assumption based on, the facial expression that's in their purview.
Yeah. On this whole facial recognition thing, I wanted to ask you about this. I know that when I see people teach emotional intelligence, a lot of them use, like, they go through photos of people's faces and expressions and say, oh, this is emotional intelligence, recognizing emotion. And I wanted your thought on that. And also, I know that in law enforcement, they use this a lot. And I was curious your thought on that. And I'm super interested in reading your new study. But just give me your thought on like using, facial expressions as recognizing emotion, and particularly in law enforcement, how they use that?
I think it's problematic, and many researchers, including people like Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's a pretty well-established emotion scientist, have proven that a lot of the older studies around emotion perception, they were inflating accuracy. Because like if you get a face like this, I do this, and then I give you 5 response options. Is Mark happy, sad, angry, calm, or fearful? 3 out of the 5 are definitely not right. Right? I'm definitely not angry, sad, or fearful.
Right. Yeah.
Happy or calm, you may whatever. So your chances of getting a correct answer are highly probable.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a problem right then and there, right? The second is that if I just give you the facial expression and I say, what's the feeling? We notice that people's agreement gets much smaller. So you start getting a wider range of emotions that people are projecting onto the facial expression. So what that tells us, is that maybe there's more variability into the way we see facial expressions than we anticipated. And the face is not just a face. And then you layer things on like context, which sometimes we know, sometimes we don't know. And then you layer things on, like culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I always say, as a white man growing up in New Jersey, I was exposed to mostly other white people's facial expressions.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of diversity where I grew up.
Yeah.
And now, I work at a university that's diverse. I live in New York City, where it's very diverse. And I'm a martial artist, and I went to Korea, and I was like, wow, like the Korean way of displaying emotion is not exactly the same as the New Jersey way.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking, like, if you're not very well, if you don't have a lot of understanding, you start thinking to yourself, they're weird over here, or they're different. And that's not real. That creates more conflict and alienation, right? And so the emotion scientist among us is curious and starts recognizing that how we feel, the way we display emotions is not biological. It's cultural, right? There's a lot of culture involved in that. And I think that's an important thing for people to know when they're learning about emotional intelligence, that, if we only look at ruler through a Western lens, we're going to make mistakes that are not going to be helpful to building good relationships and understanding other people. Right.
And one more thing in this section, and we're spending some time in R, but we're getting a lot of this set up. You have, in recognizing emotion, you have the mood meter. And for those watching the video version of this, I'll put up the image here of the mood meter. If you're listening to the audio, you can just Google mood meter and it'll pop right up.
Actually, I have to interrupt you because you have to check out our new app, which is called the How We Feel app.
Yes, you can.
Seen that yet?
Huh?
Did you get to see that yet?
Oh yeah, I use it all the time. Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic. But you can Google the mood meter. You can also download the How We Feel app, and you can interact with it. It's fantastic. It is so good. I love the How We Feel app, and it's free, for lifetime. Correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
We're very lucky. So that's fantastic. But tell us about the mood meter and how you use it.
Yeah. So the mood meter is a tool that is rooted in a scientific theory that was formulated by James Russell and also Lisa Feldman Barrett, that there are these core dimensions of affect, arousal and valence. And so on the x-axis of the mood meter is what we call pleasantness or valence, and the y-axis is arousal or energy or activation. And you basically cross the axes to create your 4 quadrants. the yellow, the red, the blue, and the green. My colleague David Caruso, who did work in organizational, EI, started using this to teach people just to label their feelings. And then we brought that into Ruler, and then we added colors, and we made it more kind of, friendly for people to use. And essentially, yellow stands for high energy, pleasant emotions like happy, excited, jubilant, euphoric, optimistic. Green is calm, content, tranquil, peaceful, chill, relaxed. Blue is kind of the down, disappointed, lonely field. And then the red is both the anxiety and the anger categories of emotion. And it's what I like about the mood meter is that it takes the complexity of what's going on in your brain. Like, how am I feeling? Oh, I don't even know what I'm, and says, well, wait a minute. Are you pleasant or are you unpleasant? Okay, well, slightly pleasant. What's your energy like today? Is it high or low? It's kind of low. So I'm green.
Right.
What's going on for you right now? Oh, I'm sitting in a podcast, having a good conversation. How are you feeling? Feeling chill. If a little higher up, I'd be engaged. If I were a little more blue, I'd feel lonely or disappointed. If I were activated, I'd be worried. And I think it's quite helpful to help people organize, their emotional life. So
yeah, it's fantastic. And I use it when I teach this and I show it to people, and you can just see the light bulbs going on instantly. And I love the color coding, and it's such a great tool. So I really encourage everyone to take a look at this and get involved in it. The other thing, we'll talk a little bit more about this in labeling, but let's move on to
understanding.
You. Yeah, you is understanding. So tell us more about that.
So understanding is kind of understanding that emotions tend to have these causes, the reason why we get angry, and that's why it's called anger and not fear, right? There's a reason why we feel content versus happy, because there's a difference. At least we've created language, and we create definitions to clarify these concepts. And so I think it's important for us to have a consensus on that. Because otherwise, if I say I'm happy and you think that happy is anger, that's weird. And so happy, right, means one thing. Content means another. Anger means another. Disappointment another. And if we understand what causes us to have those feelings, then when we're experiencing those things, we could label our feelings accurately. And at the same time, what's important, I think, for us to understand is that, given my experience growing up, you live in Oklahoma, so you're where you are in the South, right?
There's a big debate in Oklahoma about what part of the region we are. So the South is good enough. Yeah.
All right. I don't want to get in trouble on this podcast.
No, it's fine.
And I'm an East Coaster, which comes with its own perceptions, right? Now, why did I go there? Oh, and I'm also Jewish, and I presume you're not Jewish. And it's not about that. It's more about the fact that I am going to have a lived experience that is different from you because of where I grew up and my religion and many other factors. And I say that because, I may not be sensitive to the things that people in Oklahoma go through because I never lived there.
Right.
Or sensitive to the things that are related to, if you're religious, to your religion, because I don't practice your religion. And at the same time, you may not understand as much, about my life growing up on the East Coast, as a Jewish man. And that's okay, because you can't, there's no way that we can understand everybody's experience.
Sure.
However, we can respect it.
Right.
And not try to make people who they're not. And when someone says to you, the comment, I'm just making this up now,
Sure.
but, the comment that you made around Jewish people really hurt me. you have to understand that it really hurt me, right? And even though you don't maybe get it because, you grew up not knowing much about that comment. And so you just think it's funny, but it's not funny to me. And this applies to all kinds of things in life, right? And so what I mean by this in terms of the understanding of emotion is that we have to agree that anger comes from perceived injustice. But we have to also recognize that what I see as an injustice and what you see as an injustice can be completely different things. And that's the depth of understanding for me. And I'll leave it there. Yeah.
That was really well said, and I wish everybody could hear that and understand it. That was really good. One of the key questions in understanding emotion is you talk about the question, why do I feel this way? And that's really what you just described, is why do I feel the emotions that I'm feeling? And what you just articulated really takes you through that. Why am I feeling this emotion? And in the book on page 92 and 93, you have a bunch of questions to ask that kind of walks people through analyzing why they're feeling that way. So, of course, we're talking about the book, so I highly recommend people get the book because it's chock full of great stuff to help them walk through this process. So let's talk about L. You have the U is understanding emotion. L is labeling emotion. It really helps them drive in and name it.
Correct. Because otherwise, you don't have a model in your head of what the feeling means, nor the ability to communicate what's going on for you. And so labeling is very simple. It's just using precise language to describe your experience. So if you're angry, like I said earlier, is it peeved, irritated, anger, enraged, livid? If you're sad, is it just uncomfortable, or is it you're feeling down, or is it sadness, or is it disappointment, or is it discouragement, or despair, or hopelessness, or depression?
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons I love the mood meter, because it helps you learn 100 emotions, 25 in each of those categories. And you teach this to school children, but it's so great even for adults.
And we forget. We forget it.
Yeah, I love it.
Labeling is just finding the language, to describe the experience as accurately as possible.
And you use the term in this chapter, emotional granularity.
Yep. And so that's a term that was coined by a friend, Lisa Feldman Barrett, also, who it's this idea of distinguishing within yourself the specific emotions you're feeling. So some people are what they call clumpers. How are you feeling? Fine. Upset. All right. Well, can you give me a little bit more? I'm good. Can you give me a little bit more? Are you yellow or green? How high in the yellow? How low on the green? Yeah. What's your, on a scale from 1 to 10, is it you're the happiest you've ever been, or the kind of little bit of happy? Okay. So you're content, or you're elated. That's granularity.
Yeah. And that's so good. You also talk about, and I loved this, you talk about emotions in other languages. I have a friend from Bosnia, and she speaks several other languages, but she's translating things in English to me. And we were having lunch yesterday, and she did it yesterday. She was talking about, in Bosnian, it's this word, and she's trying to tell me what it is in English. And she speaks English very fluently, but she's like, the English word doesn't quite get the same meaning as the Bosnian word. So I love that section where you talk about emotions in different languages and how they translate.
Yeah, you just gave me an idea. I'm working on my next book right now, and I just got an idea. I got to write it down. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I love it.
My next book is called Dealing with Feeling, just so you know.
Yeah.
Which is all about regulation. Everybody says, Mark, you gave me permission to feel, but now what the hell do I do with all these feelings?
Yeah.
But there's plenty of strategies too. We don't have a rich language for every kind of emotion in English. And so, for example, in Chinese, there are like 100 words for the shame category.
Mm.
So you can have, shame, around familial things, shame around your presence, shame around, what you do in your life. And all those are different emotions that have different kind of connotations. In English, we, we say shame. That's it.
Right.
So it's encompassing. And so one of my favorite words is in Sanskrit, and it's mudita, mudita. And the translation is sympathetic joy or vicarious joy. So, for example, I remember when the pandemic was at its height, and I would take a walk, and there was like our neighbors' kids were playing in the park near our house. I'm like freaking out and like worrying about everything. And then I'm watching these kids play in the park. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're having so much fun. Like, I wish I were a kid again. And so I'm like kind of vicariously feeling their joy as they're playing and having fun.
Right.
Where I'm not the one having the fun.
Yeah.
I'm observing the fun, but feeling the pleasure from the observation.
I love it.
And we don't have a word for that in English.
Yeah.
But there's a word, mudita.
That's great. I love it. All right. So then E is expressing emotion. And you say that this is the scariest of all of them.
Well, I mean, they're all interesting and sometimes scarier than others. But the E is about expressing emotions. The reason why E is scary for a lot of people is because we, at least in Western culture, we suppress a lot of our feelings. How many times do we tell the people we love, I love you? I mean, I have people that are like, they're uncomfortable saying I love you.
There's a vulnerability there.
Yeah. Men more than women in general. Or you're like feeling disappointed in your child. And you say it in a way that just destroys them.
Mm-hmm.
Or you don't say it at all because you're afraid it's going to destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
So none of that is helpful, right? We have to figure out a way to communicate our feelings, with our children and our spouses and our pets, that helps us to have the best possible relationship. But I think that that's easier said than done. I think people are afraid of being vulnerable. People are afraid of the consequences, for being authentic. Like, my husband will hate me. My wife will never speak to me again if I tell them how I really felt. I had a teacher once, I love this. One teacher said to me, if I were honest about how I felt as a teacher, none of my students would ever want me to be their teacher.
Right.
And I was
so that's a good point. Expressing your emotion doesn't necessarily mean just word vomiting everything that you feel. And the R we'll talk about in a second is regulating your emotion, but there is an importance to expressing what it is you're feeling.
Yeah, well, think about it. If you go through life all clamped up, the emotions have to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go to your heart, or they go to your cancer, or they go
your physiology, right?
Yeah. They have to go somewhere. They go to poor eating habits. They go to yelling and screaming. They go to alcohol. They go to denying. They go to suppressing. Unexpressed emotions tend not to just dissipate. They tend to manifest themselves in bad habits. And so we have to help people feel safe and comfortable to express their feelings. And that's why in emotional intelligence, I always say it's not about the individual. It's about the entirety of it all. A kid who doesn't feel like they have permission to be their true selves in a classroom can't just be like, hey, look at me, help me out. I want to have permission to feel. They're too young to understand that. So we,
Right.
the adults who are raising kids and teaching kids, have to create the conditions for that.
Yeah.
By the way, we need it for our whole lives. So we need that as the teachers, the principals need it from the superintendent needs it from the school board.
Yeah.
And, not to go off on a tangent right now, but, there's some challenges right now in the world of education around emotions. People are pushing back, saying, they don't want this kind of education for kids.
Right.
And, we've got to figure out a way to help people who are against it understand how beneficial it is, because it really does make a difference in children's lives. And there's some fears that are out there that are that just need to be dealt with appropriately.
Absolutely. When I see things in the news or social media, people complaining about social emotional learning, I think I wish everyone could listen to Dr. Marc Brackett, because
some of them listen to me and some of them criticize me.
Yeah, I know.
But we've got some, you're in Oklahoma. Tulsa is doing amazing work with our program.
And what can I say on this podcast without getting in trouble myself? Let me just say, Tulsa's doing amazing work, and some people in our state government are doing everything they can to stop it. And I'm just astounded and angered by it. So yes, kudos to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Okay. R is regulating emotion, which I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
So tell us about regulating emotion.
So emotion regulation, is all about the strategies, that we use to deal with all of our emotions. So we can prevent unwanted emotions like, Mark, don't let that person get to you. We can reduce difficult emotions like, Mark, take a deep breath. Yes, you're upset, but you can, Mark, just take a breath, take a walk around the block. We can initiate emotions as leaders, as teachers, as parents, like, all right, we're going to play this music now. We're going to get into that yellow quadrant. We're going to have some fun. We can maintain emotions. Like we can try to I've been working a lot. I'm tired. Today's a beautiful sunny day. I'm just going to spend more time outside today and just savor that beautiful weather and feel calm and content. Or we can try to enhance emotions. I want to, boost my energy. I want to boost my feelings to be more energized at the meeting, or, more impactful. So that's the goal for emotion regulation. Then there's the strategy, which is all about, well, do I change my thinking? Do I take a nap? Do I get some food? Do I get social support? Do I talk to someone about it and get their advice? Do I go for a run? Right? There's the endless strategies that we do to support us in regulating our emotions. And so emotion regulation is really about the thoughts and the actions that we engage with to shift our emotions to the desired emotion that we want to have.
That's so important. And there's so much more in the book. And I know you have a hard stop, but I want to get this last question in. We have the music minute. Dr. Brackett, we get to know more about you by learning what kind of music you love. Tell us about the music that you enjoy. What do you like listening to?
So I would say that, I'm most passionate about jazz and blues.
I'm a big blues fan myself.
Yeah. And I usually, in my home, I have a Sonos system, and I now every day I'm kind of morning jazz, evening jazz. And I just put on the background. Sometimes I like words, sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
If I'm writing, I don't like words because then I get distracted.
Right. Do you have some favorite artists in particular that you like listening to?
So many. It's funny. This is more pop stuff, but I just saw this duet between the singer Andra Day and Alicia Keys.
She's amazing. Oh yeah.
And I was just like, gosh, they're good. I just loved it. So I really go from old stuff, really old stuff, the Louis Armstrong or the, others, to people like Diana Krall. I like it all.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I know you need to get out of here, but the book is Permission to Feel by Dr. Marc Brackett. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. How do people get in touch with you if they want to bring you into their school or have you come to a keynote forum? How do they get in touch with you?
I think the easiest thing is just go to my website, which is my name, marcbrackett.com. And then I use social media. So follow me on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff. And yeah.
All right. And it's Marc with a C.
Thank you.
MarcBrackett.com. All right. Thank you so much.
I'll see you soon. I'll see you at the conference in the fall.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am sure that you thoroughly enjoyed that interview with Dr. Marc Brackett. Be sure to pick up his book, Permission to Feel, and connect with him and check him out. We're going to do a meditation in just a moment based on some of what we just heard. Before we do, I would love to invite you to go out and rank and review and leave comments on the Mindful Leader podcast, wherever you listen, whatever platform that is. Really helps people learn more about us and that you're enjoying the podcast. You can also visit us at pendulumcoaching.com. We have a weekly email newsletter, and you can sign up for that there. And you can also look around, learn a little bit more about me, and I would love to come speak for you, work with your organization in keynotes, workshops, coaching, any way I can help out. So let's prepare ourselves for a time of meditation. And if you're driving, as always, please be safe and be careful. And otherwise, if you're sitting in a chair, kind of like mine, you can put your feet on the ground, just kind of get grounded there. I like to place my hands in my lap, make sure your back is rested and supported on the back of your chair. You can close your eyes if you like, if that's helpful. If you're sitting in another position, laying down or in a recliner, that's fine. I always like to take a few breaths just to make this transition. So let's inhale and exhale and inhale and exhale and inhale and exhale. You can continue to just breathe normally. One of the things Dr. Brackett talked about was being an emotion scientist compared to being an emotions judge. I'd like us to reflect on that for a moment. First, I want us to think about the ways in which we are emotion judges, the way you might personally be putting that into practice. Do you find yourself closing off your emotions or dismissing your emotions? Not really paying attention to your emotions. And when you do feel emotions, you try to put them away, ignore them, work around them. That's being an emotion judge. I'd like for you to think for a moment how you do that in your own life. We all do it from time to time. Think about the ways that you kind of short circuit processing your emotions or judge your emotions. The opposite of being an emotion judge, or the solution to being an emotion judge, is to be an emotion scientist. When we do this, we are curious about our emotions, as well as the emotions of others. And we examine them. We reflect on them. We think deeply about our emotions, what we're feeling, how it makes us feel, why we feel that way. And the same with others, what they're feeling, how does it make them feel, why are they feeling that way. First, let's think about yourself as an emotion scientist and examining your own emotions. Are you doing that? How do you go about doing that? Or what can you do to be better at being curious and reflective of your own emotions? Now think about the ways you can be an emotion scientist toward the emotions of others, being curious and reflective about how they process and use their emotions. Think about how you can do that better. Thank you for thinking about how to be a better emotion scientist. Let's inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. And one more time, inhale and exhale. You can open your eyes if you like. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Mindful Leader podcast. Be sure to pick up Dr. Brackett's book, Permission to Feel. I know you'll get a lot out of it. Be sure to connect with him if you need a speaker or someone to do workshops on emotional intelligence, especially if you're in schools. Be sure to reach out to him. Be sure to tell all of your friends about us, and we will see you next time on The Mindful Leader.